Welcome to my travel video regarding the Federal Triangle in Washington, D.C. In January 2024, I took a road trip to Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. During my visit, I encountered a wide array of fascinating symbolism. Researcher and author David Ovason, in his book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, advises that there are 23 complete zodiacs and over 1,000 zodiacal and planetary symbols in Washington, D.C. That the arcane secret of Washington, D.C. is deeply involved with the simple geometric form of a triangle. This triangle is so largely imprinted upon the map of the city that it is identified by a name which emphasizes its function as much as its geometric shape. This is referred to as the Federal Triangle, which runs its hypotenuse along Pennsylvania Avenue and is replete with cosmic and arcane meaning. In this video, I explore the symbolism dotted around the Federal Triangle, the central hub of the national bureaucracy. I also explore the musings of several authors and researchers on the subject of symbols in Washington, D.C., and their connection to astrology and Freemasonry. From what can be pieced together from historical records, the Freemason and French engineer Pierre-Charles L'Enfant chose the distribution of the three main sites for the city. These are what we now call the Capitol, the White House, and the Washington Monument. The avenue joining the first two important sites, Pennsylvania Avenue, determined the approximate angle of the radiants from the Capitol. These radiants were imposed upon a grid of streets oriented on a north-south line, in a way which some historians trace back to ancient Roman foundations and others to plans of Babylon. The L'Enfant Triangle, with its three primal buildings at its corners, is almost the same as a right-angled triangle which may be traced in the skies around the constellation of Virgo. A testament to the importance of Virgo in the planning and creation of Washington, D.C. The constellation Virgo is encased in a stellar triangle traced between the three first magnitude stars: Regulus, Alpha Leonis, Spica, Alpha Virginis, and Arcturus, Alpha Boötes. This triangle of stars seems to reflect the central triangle in the plan of Washington, D.C. The stars of the Virgoan triangle correspond with the L'Enfant triad, with Regulus falling on the Capitol, Arcturus falling on the White House, and Spica falling on the Washington Monument. I will cover this more extensively in a future video. The three architectural structures which constituted the genius of L'Enfant's plan have been erected in more or less the same position as he suggested in 1791. So fundamental is a triangle to the map of Washington, D.C., that in present day, the triangular block to which the original L'Enfant plan gave rise has been condensed. It retains the hypotenuse of Pennsylvania Avenue, but is pulled in the right-angled triangle formed by the National Mall with 15th Street to make a smaller triangle appropriately named the Federal Triangle. The Freedom Plaza, originally known as Western Plaza, is an open plaza located near 14th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest in the Federal Triangle. The plaza is a modification of an original design by architect Robert Venturi that the United States Commission of Fine Arts approved. The plaza features an inlay that partially depicts Pierre-Charles L'Enfant's plan for the city of Washington. There is the Western Plaza plaque describing the history and features of the plaza and of the L'Enfant plan. The plaque's engraved illustration identifies the locations of the plaza's major elements. The Freedom Plaza also has images of the Great Seal of the United States inset in the sidewalk. Author James Wasserman, in his book, The Secrets of Masonic Washington, advises that the design for the Great Seal was begun by a committee, chosen at the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. That included Freemasons Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and they were also assisted by Freemason and portrait painter Eugene du Cimetière. Each committee member proposed a different design for the seal. The designs of the first committee were rejected by Congress in 1777. Author and researcher Michael Howard, in his book, The Occult Conspiracy, advises the secret influence of the esoteric societies in the American Revolution, both Masonic and Rosicrucian, is illustrated by the occult symbolism of the American flag and the Great Seal, which is the national symbol of the country. The designing of the Great Seal of America, which is the country's symbolic coat of arms, was also an act surrounded by occult significance and mystery. On the obverse side of the Great Seal is the bald-headed American eagle, which in astrological symbolism represents the zodiac sign of Scorpio, also known as Aquila. This sign is associated with death, rebirth, sexuality, and regeneration. The eagle is holding in its talons a bundle of arrows and an olive branch. This represents the conflicting forces of war and peace, which have characterized the American nation over the years. In occult terms, it symbolizes the dualistic concept of good and evil, light and darkness, the male and the female, which the Masonic Templar tradition inherited from the Gnostics and the Manichaeans. Researcher and author Nicholas Hager, in his book, The Secret Founding of America, advises that in December 1776, Freemason, Zionist, Rosicrucian, and founding father of the United States of America, Benjamin Franklin, had been sent to Paris as a colonial ambassador to seek military and financial help for the American colonies. While there, Benjamin Franklin came in contact with the Illuminati, likely with its founder Adam Weishaupt himself. Seeing as Benjamin Franklin was well known and widely popular, it would have been natural for Weishaupt or one of his agents to contact such a popular figure who embodied Illuminati revolutionary principles. From this meeting, Franklin learned the esoteric significance of the number 13, the 13th being the day in October 1307 that the Knights Templar persecution began, and the Illuminati plan for 13 American colonies, which were to become a new world democracy, a philosophical Atlantis. He also saw a sketch of the seal Weishaupt had produced for the Illuminati, which sought to unite Zion and the Templars. The Illuminati seal's reverse side showed a Templar 13-layered, 4-sided pyramid with its capstone missing. Above was a triangle and sun rays, and within it, the all-seeing eye of Osiris and Sion, which some said represented Weishaupt's spying system. On the bottom layer in Latin was a date, 1776, the year Weishaupt founded the Illuminati. The seal represented the secret doctrine of the ages, the plan to build a new Atlantis in the New World. Adam Weishaupt adopted the reverse side of the seal as a symbol of the Illuminati when he founded it on the 1st of May, 1776. I covered the connection of Adam Weishaupt, the Illuminati, with the founding of the United States and the ideology of democracy in my previous video titled Capital Area, Part 1. The esoteric significance of the pyramid was connected with Atlantis. There was a belief that the University of Atlantis, where all arts and sciences originated, was housed in a pyramid with an observatory at the top where the stars could be studied. This university was the prototype of the Invisible College of Zionist Rosicrucianism. The 13 layers of bricks symbolized the 13 colonies that would become a new Atlantis under Sion's watchful eye. The 13 letters in Anuit Coitus, announcing the birth, suggested 13 October 1307, when Templarism was first persecuted, and the 13 degrees of Templar initiation. The obverse side of the seal showed a tufted phoenix resembling an eagle. Only one phoenix is held to exist at any time, and it is believed to live for 500 years. It nests in Arabia. It dies by making a nest of aromatic boughs and spices and setting it on fire. A new phoenix is born from its ashes. So the tufted phoenix is a freemasonic symbol of Atlantis reborn in America. It holds 13 arrows and a 13-leafed plant, and above it, in a cloud, are 13 stars. There are 13 letters in the inscription E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. Union, the unification of states and eventually nations. Congress was still considering the designs for the Great Seal of America, and in 1780 it set up a second committee, which consulted Francis Hopkinson, designer of the American flag. He had used an unfinished pyramid on a 1778 $50 colonial banknote. In 1781, Benjamin Franklin seems to have sent back from Paris a copy of the Illuminati's doctrine and a replica of the unfinished pyramid and seal. As Thomas Paine met Franklin in Paris in that year and became a Grand Orient Freemason and therefore a member of the Illuminati, it is likely that he took the replica back to the United States for Franklin and delivered it in time to come to the attention of the Third Committee. The Third Committee, formed on the 4th of May, 1782, commissioned Charles Thomson and William Barton to design the Great Seal of the United States, using the Freemasonic symbolism of the unfinished pyramid surmounted by an eye. Their design for the reverse is now on the $1 bill, which shows the Illuminati symbol of Adam Weishaupt adopted in 1776. There is also an inscription, Novo Ordo Seclorum, the New Secular Order, or New Order of the Ages. This was translated by Templar Mason Henry A. Wallace, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture from 1933 to 1940, who was in charge of presenting the New Deal as the New Deal of the Ages. In 1933 or 1934, Wallace drew Templar Mason President Roosevelt's attention to the image's New Deal connotations, as a result of which Roosevelt, a descendant of the Illuminatus Clinton Roosevelt, put it on the $1 bill. The full Latin text on the reverse thus reads, announcing the birth of a new secular order, or New World Order. Freemason and 31st President Herbert Clark Hoover laid the cornerstone of the Commerce Department building on July 10, 1929, not realizing that in the 1980s the building would be renamed after him. Today it is known as the Herbert C. Hoover Building that houses the Department of Commerce. To the Freemasons, designing ceremonial cornerstone and foundation stone rituals revolved around examining the ceremonial in the light of astrology. The date of July 10, 1929 was well chosen as both the moon and Mars were in Virgo. Many of the cornerstone and foundation stone rituals in Washington, D.C. fall under the zodiac sign of Virgo. On the western facade of the Herbert C. Hoover Building is a series of pediments which display the 4 elements that were designed by James Earl Fraser in 1934. The next stop in the Federal Triangle is the Andrew W. Mellon Auditorium, also known as the Department of Labor Building, designed by architect Arthur Brown. Over the portico is a pediment titled Columbia by Edgar Walter. The sculpture on the pediment depicts Columbia, the feminine personification of the United States, seated on a throne-like chair, an eagle to her right, a nude woman to her left, and the rays of the sun spreading out behind her. I went into deeper detail regarding the goddess Columbia in my travel video titled Capital Area Part 1. Columbia on the Mellon Auditorium is holding a flaming torch, representing the light of knowledge, one of the attributes of the goddess Ceres, who also relates to the goddess Isis. To her right, the totally nude woman clutches a sheaf of wheat. This figure seems to be based on the traditional image of the goddess Europa and the bull. The wheat sheaves recall the sign and constellation of Virgo, which is an earth sign. The bull she rides reminds us of the zodiacal earth sign of Taurus. The Environmental Protection Agency building, once known as the Interstate Commerce Commission building, has pediments with astrological symbols. David Ovason, in his book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, describes that the pediment sculpted by Wheeler Williams in 1935 shows a nude man reclining upon swirling clouds, holding a caduceus representing the god Mercury, the ruler of Virgo. Like the eagle above the god Mercury, the 2 winged wind gods on either side point to symbolism of the pediment representing the element of air, the zodiac sign of Libra, the autumnal equinox, and the suit of swords in the tarot. On the same building of the Environmental Protection Agency, there is a pediment showing a naked woman riding a seahorse with leaping dolphins to the front and the rear. This was sculpted by Edward McCartan. It represents the element of water, the zodiac sign of Cancer, the summer solstice, and the suit of cups in the tarot. Next is a pediment of a woman resting her right arm on a jar, from which pours fruit through a cornucopia. This pediment was sculpted by Sherry Fry. It represents spring, when nature begins again to reveal her bounty. This is confirmed by the 2 rams in each corner. It represents the element of fire, the zodiac sign of Aries, the vernal or spring equinox, and the suit of wands in the tarot. The next pediment shows a naked man leaning against a bull. He is stretched out upon rocks. At his feet is a millstone, and in the corner is a sheaf of wheat. The weight of the rocks and the millstone and the wheat suggests they are a product of the earth. This is symbolic of the earth element and the suit of pentacles in the tarot. The William Jefferson Clinton Building also houses the Environmental Protection Agency. It has a pediment titled The Spirit of Progress and Civilization. On the left of the pediment is the bearer of the printed word. At the right is Mercury, Lord of Commerce and Communication. The god Mercury appears all over Washington, D.C., as does the constellation of Virgo and the zodiac sign of Virgo, which is ruled by the planet Mercury. The Internal Revenue Service building was the first new structure in the Federal Triangle to be completed sufficiently for occupation. The IRS building has little to no ornamentation, and so not much to describe regarding this structure. However, the history and function of the Internal Revenue Service itself is a dubious story worth examining. In the documentary film, America, From Freedom to Fascism, the subject of the IRS, the income tax, and the Federal Reserve System is put under the microscope. In 1913, powerful banking interests, who had been trying for years, finally achieved their long-term goal of a silent coup d'etat by taking control of the American government. They convinced Secretary of State Philander Knox to lie to the American people and tell them that the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, had been legally ratified by the state when it had not. This tax would ultimately wind up in the pockets of the bankers, and these bankers were well aware of this. This fraud now led the American people to believe there was a tax on their labor. Congress and the President are well aware of this. In 2003, this was cited in a court case stating, if you examine the 16th Amendment carefully, you would find that a sufficient amount of states never ratified that amendment. U.S. District Court Judge James C. Fox. Also, in 1913, the bankers committed their second and most heinous fraud to be perpetrated on the American people by bribing senators to pass the Federal Reserve Act without the required constitutional amendment. This was done during Christmas vacation, when many senators were home celebrating the holidays with their families, and that is how the Federal Reserve Act came into being. The bankers understood whoever issued the money for America would control the government, and now the Federal Reserve can issue dollars legally. Rothschild knew that he and the other bankers would now control the laws of the nation. The government gave these bankers one of the most important powers, and now had to borrow money from them and pay interest to finance the government. With this, the American people were forced to lower their standard of living and pay a graduated income tax to the government, just so the government could give these bankers more profits. President Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, later said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction, but by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Most people believe that the income tax is legal and that the revenue from the income tax is used in the public interest. However, There is a substantial conclusive body of evidence that the American income tax system represents the most pernicious form of tyranny. It is the greatest hoax perpetrated against the working men and women of America. American citizens, along with the We the People Foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in America. The federal government itself refuses to provide the American people, who are coercively being subjected to this extraction of their private property, without any underlying legal justification. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law. On August 31, 2005, Judge Emmett Sullivan ruled that the government doesn't have to answer to the American people's questions regarding the income tax, even though it is guaranteed under the First Amendment. Our government made a decision that it doesn't have to show the law that it enforces. When President Reagan was elected, one of the first things that he did was appoint a blue ribbon panel of business people headed by Peter Grace, commonly referred to as the Grace Commission. Their job was to research all of the various areas of the federal government and make a report. One of the quotes from the Grace Commission is, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. We've been brainwashed. People have been told that we need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. A good question to ask is, if that is true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913? Most people will say, well, if we don't pay income tax, what will happen to education? They don't understand. Education is paid for the most part, out of state and local property taxes. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there is no money coming into the government? The tax on gasoline pays for highways. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction. The amount of money that America spends on defense is exactly equal to the amount of corporate income tax. The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society. The income tax is the instrument of totalitarianism. It is the means by which the government can manipulate people and put you into a condition of servitude. The next stop is the National Archives building, charged with the preservation and documentation of government and historical records. Housed within this building are the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. The construction of the National Archives building possesses a lot of Virgoan symbolism. The formal breaking of the ground was on the morning of September 9th, 1931. When 4 planets, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune, were in the zodiac sign of Virgo. The cornerstone for the National Archives building was laid by Freemason and President Herbert Hoover on February 20th, 1933. 3 planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Neptune, and the nodal point of the dragon's tail were in the zodiac sign of Virgo. Researcher and author David Ovason, in his book The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, advises that Virgoan symbolism is reflected in several elements on the facade. There is a bare-breasted woman cradling in her right arm a sheaf of wheat and supporting against it a young child. This statue is entitled Heritage, and it was modeled by David K. Rubens. The motto below the statue reads, "The heritage of the past is the seed that brings forth the harvest of the future." The woman with this child backed by wheat is a prototype of the celestial virgin, Virgo, who bared so many different names throughout history, from Isis with her son Horus, through to the Virgin Mary with the child. There is also a male statue called Guardianship. He holds a battle helmet in his right hand and a sword and fasci in his left. The inscription on his base reads, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty," a statement attributed to Freemason and third President Thomas Jefferson. John Russell Pope was the architect of the National Archives building. He was also the designer of the Masonic Temple in Washington, D.C., located on 16th Street. Pope had interest in sacred buildings from the past, and this shines through in the 72 colossal columns with Corinthian capitals of the National Archives building. No doubt he was aware of the sacred nature of the number 72, the most arcane in numerology. The number 72 touches upon the intimate connection between man and the cosmos, as 72 expresses the esoteric secret of the circulation of human blood, and at the same time, the cosmic drift of the stars known as precession. The average healthy heart beats 72 times in 1 minute. The sun drops back against the zodiac 1 degree every 72 years. The number 72 appears in many traditions. The 13th century Sufi, Haydar Amuli, described his treatise on numerology, spirituality, and the history of religion as the expression of the balance of 72. In the year 1128, the Order of the Knights Templar were officially recognized at the Council of Troyes. Cistercian Bernard de Clairvaux drew up the Rule of Observances, which was to guide the Templars. From its inception, the order had been rooted in esotericism, and it is therefore no surprise that Bernard's rule should have contained 72 articles. Freemason Albert Pike pointed out, it was not without a secret meaning, that 12 was the number of the apostles of Christ, and 72 that of his disciples. Federal Trade Commission building is also known as the Apex Building. The reason why is because it was conceived from the very beginning as the eastern tip of the Federal Triangle. In July 1937, the Treasury Department held a competition among American sculptors to provide works to grace the eastern side of the Federal Trade Commission building. The winner was an unknown sculptor named Michael Lance. His theme of a strong man subduing a horse is symbolic of man controlling trade. Above the eastern doorway overlooking Constitution Avenue is an image of a woman displaying Virgoan imagery by holding a sheaf of wheat, and this was sculpted by Concetta Scaravaglione. Another bas-relief to the west of the same facade is by Carl Schmitz and shows two men trading. One is an African holding a horn. The final stop on my visit to the Federal Triangle was the Mellon Fountain. In July 1947, Congress approved the creation of a memorial fountain to Andrew W. Mellon, one of the richest and most influential Freemasons of the first half of the 20th century, who had died in 1937, leaving his important art collection to the nation. Congress ordered that the fountain be constructed in front of the National Gallery at the intersection of Pennsylvania and Constitution Avenues. The fountain was completed in 1952. There are 3 basins on the fountain. I visited during winter, so the water was not flowing. Below the lip of the second bowl, inset on the sides, are the 12 signs of the zodiac, designed by Sidney Waugh. Interestingly, the zodiac sign of Aries is oriented so that it receives the first rays of sunlight on March 21st, which marks the vernal or spring equinox. Unfortunately today, the U.S. courthouse and trees filters the light that shines on Aries. The Mellon Fountain is the fulcrum of balance for the 2 massive groups of zodiacs which hang at either end of this section of Constitution Avenue, with the Dirksen Building and its ceiling zodiac to the east, and the National Academy of Sciences with its door zodiac to the west. A testament to the zodiacal and astrological orientations that radiate through Washington, D.C.